Dear guests, I warmly welcome you to our event. I am Dorottya Zurbó, responsible for the cultural program at the Goethe-Institut Budapest. Our event, which was titled Through a Glass Darkly, Documentary Filmmaking During a Health Crisis. I would like to welcome you also on behalf of our Institute Director Evelyn Hust, who unfortunately cannot be here now. This is a joint event of the Goethe-Institut and Institut Français with the support of the German-French Cultural Fund, and we organized this panel discussion together with the FFP program of the National Film Institute Hungary. So let me introduce you our panelists in the discussion. Dorottya Zurbó, documentary filmmaker. Marianne Lère, documentary filmmaker and producer. And Uwe-Lothar Müller. And our moderator will be Sára László, producer.
So yes, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming and thank you all for being here with us. We have a journalist and two documentary filmmakers here with us. So we are here today to discuss, talk about how the pandemic affected their work and how they dealt with it, how they adapted to the situation. We will maybe start with a short introduction, that you talk a little bit about yourselves, about your work. Maybe start with you, Uwe.
I'm Uwe, and I'm a journalist, and I'm working for a magazine, Art Reportage. That means every week we have 1 hour of program with reports from abroad, outside of the European Union. And well, we made a lot of reports about Corona. We made a lot of reports all over about other subjects, but about other issues. But I don't know. You want me to tell how difficult it was for us to program, or not yet? Okay.
Not yet, please.
Okay,
just go a quick run, and I will go into the details.
Marianne here. I'm a Paris-based producer and director. I've been making films, documentary films, for the last 15 years. Before that, I spent 10 years in the UK working in fiction, which is an altogether field of production, and I'm delighted to be here today with you, and that's it.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Dorottya, and I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I also teach documentary filmmaking at different universities. And I graduated in a very special program. It was called Dokumentumfilm, and it's an international joint master program where we were like 24 students from all over the world, and this course really affected my career because thanks to the collaboration like happened in that course, I'm making documentaries not only in Hungary but different parts of the world.
Thank you. Before we go into each project, I just would like to suggest that as we are an intimate group of people here, not so many, that if you have any questions as we go on, please don't hesitate and just ask, and we don't have to wait until the end with the Q&A. We already had a little talk beforehand, which was very useful for me, and I learned that very, very painful but also interesting things came out of all your work because of the COVID pandemic. And maybe start with you, Marianne, who were far ahead in production with a documentary made for Arte, when suddenly, you continue.
Hello? Yeah, it's working. Just to give you an idea, I started making this film on workers in Europe. That was back in 2018. Started developing, meeting people. Then for the whole year of 2019, I filmed. So I went to Germany, I went to France, of course I was based in France, went to the UK and filmed these people on a regular basis. I would go there 2-3 times a month, and it was wonderful. And then I had to deliver the film by June 2020, and so we entered post-production. We entered the editing room it was end of January, I think, or beginning of February, I can't remember, but beginning of 2020. And then, bam, COVID happens. And so it was a disaster, because I just started editing. It was a 2 times 1 hour program, so it was quite ambitious. I had a deadline by June 2020, and the difficulty lied as well in the fact that I didn't know my editor that well. And when the pandemic, when the lockdown happened, was announced in France, everybody freaked out, just freaked out, because we'd never experienced such a thing. And my editor disappeared for like 6 weeks. I couldn't get hold of him. He just disappeared. He was very frightened because his dad was hospitalized, and which I mean, afterwards I understood completely. But it was very very overwhelming. So, well, we had to adapt, basically. We had to rethink our procedure, working process. So yeah, that was. I could go into more details later, but this is how it started. This is how the shit started, basically.
And just to ask, when you have an editor not reacting or can't get hold of you for 6 weeks, did you start to think about looking for a new editor?
Yeah, which I did. Yeah. So what happened was, after 3 weeks, my producer and I thought, okay, this can't go on. I mean, this is ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. I was, for personal reasons, when the lockdown was announced, I was staying at my mother's in the southwest of France, in Toulouse. My mother is 81 years old, and she also freaked out. So I said to her, look, I'm going to stay for a while with you. We're going to see how things evolve in the future. And within 2 weeks, I knew that the situation was going to get worse. So I decided to stay in Toulouse. And so my producer, who's based in Paris, said to me, look, we need to find another editor. We can't go on like this, And so I started working with my assistant, whom I completely trust, and he's a great guy. But he wasn't really up to the level of, the demand, the expectation of the film I wanted. But we started working together, and he sort of made a first rough cut, which helped eventually, because when my editor re-emerged to the surface, we could actually resume work, and But it was it was difficult. We managed, though. We delivered the film a few months later, but we did it. And it was broadcast in April this year.
Okay, we will talk about also the shooting, because you also had some shooting ahead, but maybe before that, we leave you to
that's another story.
To relax a little bit before. And Dorottya, can you tell us in what stage your project? What is your project you were working on at the time, and at what stage COVID struck you?
So basically, a few months before COVID started in 2019, I just started to develop a new documentary project which is taking place in Bhutan, and I'm working on this project with a Bhutanese co-director who was my former classmate in this international joint program. And what is interesting in Bhutan that, or what many people heard about, that they have a happiness ministry, and where happiness agents are working to go around in the country and to go from door to door, and with a 4-hour survey they are measuring the happiness level of the society. Also they have 5-year happiness plans, and they have a gross national happiness policy. So usually what we know about Bhutan, that everything is about happiness. And our idea was, with my co-director, that it's a really nice excuse and framework to follow 2 happiness agents who are going from door to door and meeting with different people from several social classes, and through them we can really step into the lives of the everyday people, and we can tackle that subject that what is beyond in this governmental measurement and ideology of happiness, and what is their real desires and dreams. And our 2 main characters, 2 middle-aged men, and when we get to know them at the ministry in the happiness department, it was very interesting because they kind of look like the Bhutanese Laurel and Hardy, and one of them is actually desperately sad because he never had a girlfriend before, and he is searching love. And we thought that it's kind of an absurd dramatic setting about a happiness agent who is in search of happiness, an unhappy happiness agent. And maybe if we will talk more about the project or the process of how we were affected, maybe we can watch our research trailer. It's just 3 minutes from our test shootings that we did actually in the autumn before COVID.
Yeah, we'll talk about it some more. Let's see from a different angle, because in your profession you have to deliver daily or weekly something, so there was no time for hesitation, I guess. You had to react very quickly to the situation.
Yes, just to tell you the difference between what we call reportage and documentary. If you compare it to literature, documentary is like a novel looking for eternity. And reportage is a short story, very aware of that things can change. This is one advantage, because you're always running to get something fresh and new. But in a longer way, our reportages are 24 minutes normally. And I still remember when we made a report about China in Wuhan, just the moment when in Wuhan everything was in lockdown. And I still remember my boss and me, we saw this report. It was a 36 minutes report, and we couldn't believe it. Peking was empty. Everybody was in lockdown. We said, oh my God, what's happening there? They must be crazy, the Chinese. And weeks after, the same thing happened here. And I still remember I thought I'm going to go into a long holiday now because everything was blocked. But we have a broadcasting every week, so we have a magazine, 1 hour, with reports from abroad. And we thought about what could we do? Because there was no possibility to go besides the borders, and journalists, reporters were blocked everywhere. And then my boss and another guy from a production company from Hungary Films, you may know, Anthony Dufour, they had a brilliant idea, because Mr. Dufour from Hungary Films, he is in touch with a lot of freelance correspondents all over the world. And so he proposed to make something like a Corona diary. And it was quite interesting, because all these correspondents, they filmed themselves with their iPhone and sent it from New Delhi, from Canada, from the United States, from Morocco, from France, to Anthony Dufour. And he developed something like a Corona diary. We made it every 2 weeks approximately, and it was a 12-minute piece just to show us what's happening in the world in Corona times. That was quite interesting. And besides that, we tried to get in touch with people who could work for us somewhere. So something what we called, we had one editor, me or a colleague. We tried to get in touch with people somewhere in the country that could just deliver us something that we could edit here or they could edit there, and they could change it just to find a way, to find a solution to make reportages and reports, little documentaries, short stories from journalists about what's going on in the world, just to inform our public every week. And that was quite difficult. And we had to respect too that if you send out a reporter to make something, he has to be covered and he has to be protected. You can't send out somebody just in a situation which is difficult, and after he comes back and he's infected, has coronavirus, and he's dying. So this is quite tough. It was a quite tough situation. Well.
And how did you deal with it? Like, did you have in the reduction like big talks about what your policy should be about?
All the time.
All the time?
All the time. At that time when the coronavirus went crazy in Brazil, we saw that Mr. Bolsonaro was not able to handle the pandemic in his country. And when the infections grew up quickly, we said we should have a report about what's going on there. But we had nobody in Brazil directly, but we had a colleague, a correspondent, a German correspondent in Buenos Aires. And we talked to her, could you manage something? And she said, I know a producer and a cameraman in Rio de Janeiro I was working with some times ago. So we said, okay, let's try the thing. And she contacted them, and we said we would like to see what's going on in Rio de Janeiro, in Brazil. We'd like to see what's happening in the lockdown. We'd like to see what's going on in the hospitals. Could you just get into these hospitals or just show us something? And go together to a demonstration of supporters of Mr. Bolsonaro, because there were a lot of people in Brazil supporting Mr. Bolsonaro and saying this is crazy, this is a Western invented thing that doesn't exist, the virus. So we tried that, and that was quite complicated because I called the correspondent in Buenos Aires. She called these people, and so there was just a triangle of communication between Rio de Janeiro, Buenos Aires, and Strasbourg. I'm based in Strasbourg. And we always wanted, in that report showed that they managed to get in touch with people in the hospital. We could not get in because it was forbidden. And we had to take care that they protect themselves, wearing masks and keeping a distance. But how do you do that? From Strasbourg to Buenos Aires to Rio de Janeiro, this is difficult. So we always had to say, please protect yourself. Don't get too much risk. It's just a journalistic short story. You won't risk your life for that. So, and there was one situation I will always never forget that. It was very difficult to film, and they always told us what they could have done. They were in the favela, they were near a hospital, and they found a nurse who told them something, and they talked to normal people. The only thing that was missing was the supporters from Mr. Bolsonaro. And we said, isn't it possible to get close to these people from the party of Mr. Bolsonaro? And then I got a call, I still remember that. It was in the morning at 7:30. The correspondent from Buenos Aires, she talked to me, she said, we have the thing. These two reporters, they're in touch with Bolsonaro's supporters, and they can accompany them in the bus from Rio de Janeiro to Brasilia, where they will demonstrate for Bolsonaro, demonstrate against COVID and the pandemic, and for supporting Mr. Bolsonaro. And that bus, and the trip will take 12 hours back and to go there and to come back. And these Corona supporters, they don't protect themselves against the virus. So that was a crucial question, because they found what we wanted to get in touch with the supporters of Mr. Bolsonaro. And I told her, I said, I called my boss, I don't know if we can do it. I called him, and he agreed with me. We can't send two reporters from Brazil we don't even know personally into the bus with a bunch of crazy Bolsonaro supporters with no masks for 12 hours to go there, film a demonstration, and come back there would be, from a journalistic point of view, this was the story. This story risked their lives. And they wanted to do it. And I had to convince my correspondent in Buenos Aires to convince them not to do it. Because there's no way, you know. We're very often sending reporters into war zones. But all these reporters, they know what they're doing. And I can tell you, I'm 61 years old. I still remember how it was in the Cold War. And I have a map in my office from '68. And for me as a German, Hungary was considered as an enemy country. But this coronavirus, this is the worst crisis I ever lived in my 61 years. And there were tough ethical questions to answer this crisis.
Back to you, Marianne. So far we talked more about logistic difficulties, but the situation also had an impact on your film content-wise. I mean, it was a whole new context that was added to your initial subject, and you had some shooting. Okay. Yeah, so you had some shooting ahead of you, so can you tell us about that?
Sure. The structure of my film was very simple. It was a very simple concept. The idea was to follow these workers. I had 8 workers throughout Europe, 8 portraits, and for each portrait, the length of it was like between 6 and 8 minutes. Some experts afterwards would comment on the portraits and literally draw conclusions, tendencies about work today. So it was a very simple concept, but it did make sense to me, and it was the way I saw the experts after the portraits were like they were going to be filmed in a studio together, and I would have like a green backdrop, and then I could project images afterwards in post-production and do something kind of visually strong. I wanted to give it a strong identity to the film. And then Corona happened, and the experts I was meant to film during editing, some of them just dropped out. There was a lady, a sociologist, who wrote to me just before we were meant to film, saying to me, "Look, I can't do it. I'm so overwhelmed by the situation. I just can't do the filming. I don't want anybody to come to my house either." Because we were thinking of, options, alternatives, and of course the alternative was, okay, I cannot do what I had in mind first, go into the studio. So, okay, I'll send cameramen to the people, and see whether they accept to be filmed in their home or in their offices. But most of the time it was okay, it did happen, but in this situation it didn't. So it really fucked up the whole structure of my film. Basically, I thought, no, that's not going to work. It did, because you're obliged to sort of, when you're making a film, the context, and clearly this is what happened, literally could crush your mise-en-scène intentions. You've got to bear in mind that reality, the world we live in today, is so bloody, inconceivable, and because we're walking on our heads, I think. Every day passing by, I think we're walking even more on our heads, everywhere. And so now making films, making a documentary, implies the fact that your mind has to be perfectly adaptable, flexible to the context. And clearly this is what I had to do, basically. So maybe I could show you a segment of the film. You'll see the frustration of somebody who's not happy with what you're going to see, but that's the way it happened, and that's the way the film was delivered. in the end, it's okay, I get by, but I'm not entirely happy with it. You see, I mean, I filmed this sociologist, English sociologist, in an office. I had to go there, and I mean, I sent somebody there to film. I'm not happy with the framing. We did it via the telephone. It's okay, I get by. And then my French experts were filmed in a studio on a black backdrop. I get by, but this is not how I envisaged these sequences in the first place. Really, it has nothing to do. And every time I see it, it breaks my heart. But what they're saying is what counts. The message I wanted to convey here is when you lack autonomy at work, you can end up destroying democracy, because you're not creative at work, you're frustrated, you're angry, you can decide not to vote, or you can go extreme right. I'm not saying it here. I actually deleted extreme right because I didn't want to go there. But this is what it means, and this is where your directing intentions have to give a space to the contents, the voice, in fact. And so this is how it ended up, basically. So there you go.
Okay, thank you. And also the story of the person who was not capable to be in your film anymore. It brings in a very important aspect of COVID, that in fact we were all kind of paralyzed, and at the same time we should have been the most innovative, or I don't know, find new solutions, adapt to the situation, and being totally, I don't know what to do, and losing the ground.
Absolutely.
And
I think it goes both ways, if I can just react to what you just said, because I think, yes, it frustrates. It frustrates on both levels. To me, it was very frustrating on both levels. First, as a narcissistic level. Oh, God damn it! I'm not going to be able to make my film the way I want it to be. That's frustrating. Second, and that's what is more important in my eyes, after having second thoughts, is, damn it, I'm not going to have this lady in my film, because, and that's so fucking frustrating, because what she says and thinks and writes in her books is so important, and I wanted to have it in my film, and that's a frustration. But then you've got to find other ways, you've got to find other people. I did, and I had to adapt. And coronavirus, is something which is really still driving me mad about it, is the fact that with this virus, there's a sort of plethora of fake news. It's hard to find the right news today because social media just nurture and feed, fake news, and so it's very important that us journalists and filmmakers make sure that what we have in mind is either accurate with a journalist, with a journalistic work, or sufficiently genuine in the voice, in the views that we want to share with the audience, and not that kind of bullshit that you can find anywhere else.
Just one last question to you, Marianne, before going to you, back to you, Dorottya. Did you introduce Corona in your film? So the fact that you were editing while all this happened?
Yes, I did, yes, of course, yeah, I had to integrate that. So in the beginning of the film, there's a voiceover saying, during a whole year, I filmed people across Europe, workers who were ready to tell us about their experience at work, and da-da-da-da. And of course, coronavirus happened, and this is where we are today, and the experts you will see will comment on that as well. So yes, I had to integrate it.
And this voiceover, it was not gonna be there originally, or it comes back and it was...
No, it's just at the beginning, and it's my voice.
Oops.
It's my voice.
Okay.
It's because I wanted to be a personal view on the situation. So it's me talking. Making films is you talking, like Dorottya, when she makes a film on Bhutan. It's her, it's her vision as well, and that's very important. You've got to be genuine, you've got to be sincere in what you do, and get to the core of what you want to say. The rest doesn't count, really. It doesn't count.
So yet also I'm curious how much it affected your story, or what you're planning to film, because I would think that Corona had a huge effect on our happiness and level. And is this something that you started developing the project before the whole thing? But is it something that really transformed your point of view and the focus?
Yeah, actually, and this is this is one of our biggest challenge, because when we did these few days of shooting and test shooting, and when we came up with the concept and when we met with the characters, it was like 2019 October, and then few months later the pandemic started, and since then it's and of course it really affected the life of the two main characters, because the survey activity got suspended, and and it's still suspended, so they still didn't start to doing these interviews yet. So also our two main characters needed to find temporary jobs. And of course that's a major change in the story, because actually that's the dramatic frame of the film, that it's a road movie and we are going with them, and that's how we enter the lives of other people. And of course the way we reacted to this, that my co-director partner Arun started to follow the personal life of our main protagonist, so most probably the time of the pandemic will be in the film, but we decided that because this is more of a conceptual film, we are going to wait for the new survey starts, and what is also a major issue, that what I never faced before, that if you do a documentary, a long-term documentary, when you want to get close to your characters, it's really important that the people are not wearing masks, because all the emotions happen on the faces, and that's how we will feel for the characters, and we realized that that for us doesn't make much sense of filming people in masks. So our strategy was that we are going to wait, and so this way, how we were working together, we were developing the concept, we were keeping the contact with the main protagonists, and we did a tremendous amount of funding applications that I never did before, and it's actually the first time of my life that we managed to put together the funding of the film. But of course it's very frustrating that we don't know when the actual shooting, the major shooting can start. Of course, Arun, the co-director, is there, and he's shooting the personal lives of the characters, but what will be the heart of the film, that is still we are keep on postponing all the time, and I'm hoping that maybe next February I will be able to go. And because this questionnaire is measuring happiness, and we are keeping the contact with the research center of the the happiness department, I think they are going to implement a section, like a questionnaire section, that is trying to figure out how the lives of the people were impacted. And of course, this way we will reflect on the pandemic situation in the film.
So in a way, because you were in a much earlier stage, you were beginning of development, in a way you had more space to adapt, or it was less of a, I don't know, emergency reaction as Marianne had to do. It was, you had more time, and also, as if I understand why, you had no funding yet that would have, I don't know, have very specific, strict deadlines ahead of you, but you could wait, no, until you had freedom to plan a new strategy.
Yes, yes, but and also, of course, it's very frustrating for me. I never because I usually like the way I do documentaries, that I get very close to the people, and that's how you are forming your focus and the story. And it's a very strange experience for me that I met with our two protagonists only 2 years ago, and of course we are trying to keep the content online, but it's still, I don't feel the space. I'm not there. I'm not interacting with them. I'm not seeing their gestures. So it's sometimes I feel that I'm creating a fiction in my head. But of course, because I kind of, as a counterpoint, because me and the co-director Arun, we already made a documentary together. It's called The Next Guardian, and it was also kind of the same method that we were working from a distance, because anyway Bhutan is a closed country and it's really difficult to get in. The tourist visa is $250 per day, and you can only stay for 10 days. Wow. And then so we had our methods before that, how we are working and discussing the footage online, and how he's sending what he was shooting. So so it was not so new, but that it's a complete closure, and still the borders are closed, because that is their way of protecting the pandemic from the country. That's a new experience.
Okay, thanks. And I also wanted to you to talk about it a little bit, Uwe, if you could. I'm very interested in how it happened, the restrictions on the journalists, how did it evolve, did journalists have a special status all the way through from the beginning, had access to places, or you mentioned an example where they couldn't get into somewhere. Could you tell us about this?
Yes, that was quite interesting, because I still have all my papers with me. My company gave me papers that I can travel everywhere. But at the beginning of the pandemic, there was no vaccination. So at the beginning of the pandemic, you couldn't, even with these papers, go nowhere. And so we were depending on people who were in the country, as I mentioned, so that we just came into touch with them from Strasbourg or other countries to make filmmaking. And but then the situation changed, and we obliged all the reporters who were able to go out to protect themselves, and to protect themselves with masks, with distance, with disinfection, and we very much tried to go close to the situation, as you mentioned. For documentary film and for reportage, it's not nice to film people with masks. But if you're in a situation like that, you have to improvise. And reporters are always maybe a little bit more improvised as documentary filmmakers to improvise, because you have to deal with the situation. As a reporter, you don't have a book you've written, you don't have you just go out and try to find out what's going on now in the situation now, because it's, as I mentioned, it's a short story and it can change tomorrow. So reporters are not looking for eternity, and but But in that way, it was even tougher for us. And I think the Corona crisis, in some way, it was like a tsunami evolution. Normally things change. When I started filming, I went out with a camera team, the bulky camera and a sound engineer, looking, and with somebody who held the lights. And nowadays you can make documentary films and reports, reportage, with an iPhone. This is like the invention of the Leica camera after the First World War. During the First World War, you had these bulky cameras. Everybody was just like that. And then there were the first photographs from German photographers, Mr. von Salomon, which was revolutionary because they were photographing politicians in a normal situation. And this is the same thing now. The material, he's filming with his little Sony. You know, we have 2 cameras there filming us. This is extraordinary for me, who experienced the time before that happened. So we can go very close with little materials, little cameras, to people. There you have a lot of ethical questions. How far can I go? What should I do? Because you can film somebody, he doesn't even see that you're filming. You know? So, make it short. We tried to work with that, to improvise, and tried to protect the reporters as much as we could, but to encourage them to do the stories, to show for us what really is going on in the world, and to convince people to let us in. And I don't know if you can show it, but you may have seen that nowadays in Romania, the figures of infections are growing up again. And about 1 year ago, one of our reporters went to Romania, and she got extraordinary access to the hospitals. And in that report, she showed us how difficult it was to fight coronavirus in Romania. It's just one example of many countries in the world. It's not just to blame Romania, no. You have the same situation in the United States of America. You have the situations with the Querdenker in Germany. So you get to the UK, you get all over the world. It's just, but he had the opportunity to go to Romania, to film what's going on in Romania. And in some way, we did that report 1 year ago, but it's still new today. It's like a little bit of opportunity for journalists, which is rare.
Okay. Are there any questions in the audience?
Come on, a question. Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Maybe one question to you. Like, how do you approach in your project about workers, for example? I mean, these are mostly vulnerable people from this excerpt that we've seen, working in precarious conditions and so on. I mean, I'm a video journalist here in Hungary myself, and to try to make these people speak in front of a camera, especially. I mean, if you're writing articles, this is not too difficult. I mean, anonymize them and so on. But to get them in front of camera, risking their already precarious situation, how do you do that? I mean, it's super hard to do that.
Super hard.
Okay.
Yeah, super hard. It took me about a year to identify people willing to speak on camera, but then to actually gain their trust also required some time. As I said earlier, I started working on the film about work in 2018, so 1 year beforehand. It's super hard because you risk your job. Okay?
Sure.
So there's a trust agreement between myself as a filmmaker and the people you're going to interview. And the first thing I said to them was, look, I'm not here to trap you. I'm not here to make sensationalist comments. I don't want you to attract the light in a sort of vicious or devious way. I just want you to give us an idea of what you experience at work. in a very rational way. There's no, I mean, within the workers, amongst the workers I filmed, one of them is very emotional because at some point he cracks, you know, he breaks down. It's okay. I kept it in the film, but it's just for a few seconds. I didn't want that. What I wanted to show was how the conditions of workers today have degraded, how it is hard to work in difficult working conditions, but despite all of that, how humans are able to find a purpose and give meaning to what they do, despite the situations. This is not a miserable film. It's quite the opposite. If you look at the two parts, you'll see the people I filmed, they're shown as heroes. To me, they're modern heroes, because despite the conditions, they still do their job in a very positive way. If you explain that to the people you're going to film, they feel reassured. They understand what is in your mind, because this is what I had in mind. I wanted to denounce the working conditions, but I also wanted to show that, yes, it's difficult, but yeah, you can still make sense of what you do. It's a trust agreement, you know. And this is the whole thing. I mean, today, most of the people, most of the videos that you get to see on Instagram or YouTube or anyone filming with an iPhone or a smartphone, whatever you call it, some of the time, most of the time, I think, they're looking for sensations. They're looking for, look at this is quite amazing. There's no distance whatsoever. There's no thinking whatsoever. It's only based about emotions. And I think what we're trying to do here is go deeper. Yes, of course there's emotions, but also there's thinking, you know. When you explain that to the people you'd be filming, they get it. They're clever people. We're not stupid, for fuck's sake. We're intelligent people. We understand what's going on, you know. So you take it from there, and then it's simple, you know. But one thing, most of the people I filmed, they're all precarious, but yeah, I mean, the interview I led was extremely respectful of their privacy, and I didn't want to go into the sort of, you know, how can I put it? Sensation, you know.
Sure. This is very important what you say, because trust is a thing, and not to be sensational, but to look behind the sensationalism. This is very interesting. And how do you get that people trust you? I can tell you one example. We try, because we're working quicker as journalists, so you have an even quicker time convince people that they can trust in you. And now on Saturday we're just editing a report about what's going on in Turkey. You may have seen that since the last 10 years, Turkey welcomed 3 million Syrian refugees from the war. But since the Taliban took over Kabul, and there are a lot of refugees from Kabul who went via Iran to Turkey, they're just building a wall at the border in Turkey. And since the last weeks we tried very hard with a colleague, a correspondent in Istanbul, to tell us the story, what's going on in Turkey today. And she was working new for us, the first time she worked for us, and she was asking a lot of questions. It's always interesting to work with you people, just so you think about your ethics. And she said, do you agree that if I can make interviews with Afghanistan people from Afghanistan, that I can hide their faces? And I said, yes, of course. Yes, of course. We want to know what's going on, and we don't want to risk the lives of somebody who's very vulnerable. So yeah, so she went out, and she went out into the van to film the wall and to film in these centers where they put in the Afghan migrants. And of course, they actually have to convince the people, okay, we will show the reality, we will show what's really going on, you can trust us, and we can put something on your face that you won't be recognized, because all these people are living in illegality. And we're doing that often. And we will protect all the people in our reports, in our reportage, from everything. So we accept if it's important what they have to say. If they trust us, they can hide their faces, and this is important for us. So you won't be able to tell the whole story if you don't accept that.
If you're genuine, it works. If you're bullshitting,
No.
you get into trouble. As simple as that. And you apply this to anything you do in filmmaking. Anything.
Any more questions from the audience? Okay, then maybe just last to round up this conversation. I wonder that if I think of myself or our office, what I see is that more or less we're really waiting for things to get back to normal. And there are many discussions about what we can take with us from new strategies, or I don't know, but if I want to be completely honest, I would say that we don't like this. It's not fun to produce movies in these circumstances. And I wonder if you, from your side, you feel more prepared for a next project. For example, you have long-term strategies you think that you could use for a next project.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I never felt so much in the prepared and also like this urge to start filming.
No, but I mean for a next project when you start a new one, do you think that you will have a slightly different approach, like feeling less secure in you controlling everything and building this into your strategy, that suddenly something can come that totally destroys your original plans?
It's a hard question because I think documentary is always, or at least like the type of films that I'm making when you're following long-term someone's life or a life situation, you always have to be prepared in many unexpected circumstances. And many of my films, things happened that I could never imagine before, that I had to adapt. So, of course, this was more on it affected us globally, but somehow that is the nature of documentary filmmaking. To
be ready to change.
Yes, to be ready to always rethink, reconceptualize, reschedule, adapt to the needs of the protagonist. Think about your ethics. I think that is the core of this profession.
Okay. Marianne, for you? Any more questions from the audience? Okay, then maybe just last to round up this conversation. I wonder that if I think of myself or our office, what I see is that more or less we're really waiting for things to get back to normal. And there are many discussions about what we can take with us from new strategies, or I don't know, but if I want to be completely honest, I would say that we don't like this. It's not fun to produce movies in these circumstances. And I wonder if you, from your side, you feel more prepared for a next project. For example, you have long-term strategies you think that you could use for a next project?
Yes, I never felt so much in the prepared and also like this urge to start filming.
No, but I mean for a next project when you start a new one, do you think that you will have a slightly different approach, like feeling less secure in you controlling everything and building this into your strategy, that suddenly something can come that totally destroys your original plans?
It's a hard question because I think documentary is always, or at least like the type of films that I'm making when you're following long-term someone's life or a life situation, you always have to be prepared in many unexpected circumstances, and many of my films, things happened that I could never imagine before, that I had to adapt. So of course this was more on it affected us globally, but somehow that is the nature of documentary filmmaking.
Cover what's true behind the curtains, and I think it's just a big wake-up call, and everybody will survive it, and I hope your families, everybody is fine. It's a wake-up call for humanity, I think, the coronavirus, the pandemic, and we as journalists, as documentary filmmakers, we have to go on and to make our job, to do our fucking job, let's say, and to be aware of that life is vulnerable, it's fragile, and it can end soon. And as I mentioned, I always remember what happened in the Cold War when your country was my enemy. It's not long ago. In one of our reports we made in India, there's a rickshaw driver. And the rickshaw driver has a family with 8 children. He's living in the suburbs of India. And he's going out and he has no money because there are no clients. There's lockdown in India. And he's going to town and he meets a colleague of himself, a rickshaw driver too. And they're talking about jobs, and he says, I have no clients, I can't earn money. And the other guy says, yes, that's right. I only have the money left to buy a box of matches, and to burn me and the family. This is the reality outside of Europe. So we're still in a very luxury situation. We still can talk about it, we can survive it. Not easily, but we can survive it. We have the means to survive it. But outside of Europe, it's different. And this is the lesson, I think. And so we have to continue, to go further. Many steps further than anybody else to see what's happening with humanity. This is my job, this is your job. And that's it. Business as usual. But we forgot about it. This is the wake-up call.
Thank you so much. I think this is very important thought to finish our conversation with. Thank you for being here with us and sharing all your stories, and thank you for all of you for coming to visit, to listen, and good luck with all your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.